Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 18 of Dualistic Unity. I am blissfully uncertain about where this episode is going to go, what my life's going to be like tomorrow, and it's getting more and more exciting because I can always have one perspective or the other, be afraid of that uncertainty or be excited by that uncertainty. And I am very, very excited by it at this moment.
I am experiencing just a lot of change in my life. As everybody who's listening knows, my marriage recently ended about 4 months ago. Andrew and I have been working for 2 years to get this podcast going. So we're self-employed in the extreme, constantly just on the brink of whatever's happening today. This is our life. And as such, there is always the temptation to respond in a stressful way. There's always the temptation to tense up. There is always the temptation to tell myself, I know what's going to happen next, most of which revolves around all my fears. And all I can really do is accept that I'm going to dance as best I can in each and every moment and have faith in what I've become up until now. And so I'm excited for today's guest. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew and we're going to kick this off.
So yes, as Ray mentioned, we have a guest today, Don Goewey. Don used to manage the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford University Medical Center. He is a brain tumor survivor, and he is the best-selling author of the book, The End of Stress. Don, I'll let you introduce yourself here and maybe just tell us a little bit more about how you went from having one of the most stressful weeks of your life, losing your job, having a brain tumor within, what was it, about 9 days, to now being the author of a book talking about how maybe there's a way to end that stress.
Yeah, well, that was a long time ago. It was a pivot point in my life. Losing the job that you spent most of your youth climbing the career ladder to reach, only to lose it. I was a young Turk back there, and I was banging heads with the chairman of the department a lot, and he finally had enough of me, and I'd had enough of him. We both thought we were right, and neither one of us were happy about it. But and then the brain tumor came at the end of that, and I was married with 4 children and with a mortgage, and the position I had at that point was a pretty high position to have at the young age of 38 at Stanford University. It was a stepping stone to what people thought was going to be bigger and better things. And everybody was impressed with me. And so losing the job was also a huge crisis to my ego. I was going to have to face people and say, well, I climbed up that far and I didn't make it any further. And, I honest to God, I would say that terrified me as much as the brain tumor. But one of the things about the brain tumor is they told me that it was going to be very debilitating, not only from what the tumor was going to do. It wasn't cancerous. It was just in a bad place. And taking it out could create collateral damage. And so it seemed like it's not only my career was ending, my ability to work may have ended, my ability to earn a living and support my family may have been coming to an end. We could be heading for homelessness. And that got to be very terrifying. And so for 2 weeks, I got the best, being at Stanford, I was able to arrange to get the best surgeon. Wasn't available for 6 weeks. And since this thing was slow growing, I hopped on with him. And I wasn't in any big hurry to have my brain drilled into. But one thing I underestimated is having 6 weeks to ruminate about the outcomes, about what could actually go wrong, what this could actually mean in terms of dire circumstances for me. And that did happen to me. I'd wake up every morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, pace the floor out in the living room, stare out the big bay window out into the cold, dark night, imagining all of the dire things that could, feasibly happen. And then one night, about 2 weeks into doing this, and exhausting myself in this way, some part of me asked the question, what was worse? What might happen to me in the future, or the abject fear I was putting myself through by imagining the future. And maybe I could just let it go and be in the moment and take everything as it came to me. And I remembered a process I had learned in working with one of the world's great psychologists, Carl Rogers, that I had advised a lot of people to do and never done on myself. And I hadn't done it all during this ordeal. And it's a simple process of awareness. And it begins with accepting completely the fear you're in, not trying to change it, not trying to drop it, not trying to interfere with it, but just to be present with it, to allow it. And so I did that. As you know, I stepped into that process. And I think initially I thought, if I just allow it, things will calm down. And as soon as I stepped into it, it swelled up. It got enormous. I hadn't realized that as bad as it was, I was actually restraining about half of it, and it all just kind of came up and overwhelmed me. And then something very interesting happened. It was sort of like if you've ever surfed the ocean, it was sort of like when the ocean rises up and lifts you up and takes you, towards the shore, and you don't know if it's going to swallow you up, because you really don't. If you're really riding one of those big Hawaiian waves, or one of those maverick waves out here in California, it was like that. Big wave rose up, and I started on it, and once I was on it, I couldn't get off. It consumed me, and I wondered if it was going to take me under completely. And then a few moments later, I was, metaphorically speaking, I was on shore. I got delivered to that calm place, but I had to do the ride first. And for about, I don't know, a few minutes, 5 minutes, I was very calm. And then my mind, my fear started working me over again. And, I think the thing it probably said was that, okay, so you tried Carl Rogers' little trick there, but the fact still remains you're screwed. Nothing's changed. You got a brain tumor. You're never going to be able to work or support your family again. You're all going to end up homeless. And now I'm scared again. So I rode the wave again. And it went on like that for about half an hour. And after doing that for a half an hour, the one thing that I noticed is that the time I was up on that overwhelming wave was shorter and shorter, until finally I reached this point where I was at peace. And I knew I was at peace because I looked out that bay window, and it no longer looked like the cold, dark night of a black hole about to suck me and my whole family in. I looked out this time, and I saw the moon, and it was the moonlight. It was glistening on the beautiful oak tree in the front of the house. And it felt sacred, made the night feel sacred instead of it feeling like hell. And I decided right then and there that as I faced each day over the next 4 weeks before I went into surgery, I was going to let go of fear in this way. And whenever it raised its ugly head, and I did. And I had to go back to work. There was one project I had to finish to get my parachute, to get my severance package. And when I went back to work, work didn't stress me out like it did before. I was, there was even people I perceived as my enemy, and my thought was, I have to let that go, because perceiving somebody as your enemy puts you into paranoid thinking, which generates a stress reaction. And my brain didn't need any more stress reactions. It needed to calm to get me into a position where I could go into surgery in the best condition possible. And so I just let it go. I didn't even know if these people were my enemy. That was my ego's perception. And so I actually, the thought I had that people would be judging me as this guy who had failed and couldn't make it, quite the opposite happened. people were kind of astounded that there was this really calm, much nicer guy who was facing this incredible ordeal. And they thought it was rather heroic of me, And so at any rate, I kept that up. The day I went into surgery, that morning when they wheeled me in, I was kind of in a state of bliss, in a state of faith and trust and calm. And the surgery was a complete success. None of the, one or two of the problems that they predicted happened, but they were the minor ones. And right before I went into surgery, I actually got a call from one of the chairmen in one of the departments at Stanford, in the Department of Psychiatry, offering me a job at the same level I was at before, and the one I had lost. And he said he needed somebody with my attitude on his team, because everybody on his team was stressed and anxious and, paranoid and attacking one another. So he wanted to get some different energy in there, and he saw it in me. And I said to him at the time, I said, I don't know how I'm coming out of this surgery. I may not be able to work. And he said, you're going to be fine. And he told me about the mind-body connection. Well, that's exactly what happened. If you would have talked to neuroscientists back then, if I would have said, do you think this is because of my shift in attitude through this very simple process that I went through, the process of acceptance, do you think that had an effect on the way things turned out? They more than likely would have said no. They would have told me in fact, one of them told me it was hippie nonsense when I asked them about a year later. But now we know it's definitively true. There is this huge mind-body connection. It has a great deal to do with how things go in our life. And it also has a lot to do with the way our brain functions. And stress is one of those brain functions that, unfortunately, for a lot of Americans, happens to be their brain's autopilot. And they get triggered into stress reactions pretty easily. And as a result, they end up in midlife, and it's happening actually earlier to people in it's called the quarter life crisis instead of the midlife crisis now. And people end up in this place where they wonder where the fulfillment, they thought their success that they worked so hard for was going to bring to them, that didn't deliver. And the issue is it's what Tony Robbins called, he calls it success without fulfillment. And he defines that as the ultimate failure, because it's failing at living. And it turns out to be, that happens to be the experience of 86% of Americans. So what my work has been about helping people to see their way to what I call having it all, meaning achieving that outer success, but with the inner fulfillment. Because of course, everyone wants that. But this is not most people's experience of life and work. But it doesn't need to be that way. We don't need to have this empty experience that is a result of putting our nose to the grindstone for so many years. In fact, there's actually no issue concerning fulfillment beyond our problem with being asleep to the truth that we're already fulfilled, that we're already happy, we're already at peace. It's our nature. When science goes to look at human nature, one of the first places they look at is children, because what you see in children is this beautiful, uncontaminated, very fulfilled nature. And so that's what my work with people, my books are all about. It facilitates a shift in awareness. It regains our capacity to flourish inwardly and outwardly all at the same time. It's towards building that shift in awareness as you go along. It's about finding your way home to that successful, fulfilling life, which is no more and no less than coming home to yourself. And it's not difficult. In fact, it's so simple anyone could understand it, even a child, and especially a child, as I just said. So that's I think that puts in a nutshell what I'm about and how I came into this work.
That's really exciting. And it's interesting. As I said, it resonates with a lot of what I'm going through personally and what we talk about here on the podcast, which is that so much of our suffering comes from this idea that we can know what's coming, and more importantly, that we can know how we're going to deal with what's coming, and just the acceptance that you're going to deal with it as best you can based on everything that you've experienced up until then. That's all you got. You can't think your way into being more than you are. Right? All you can do is just face each and every moment and allow things to play out. And I imagine not just facing this in regards to the change in career and everything that happened health wise, but even now, I would imagine that that comes into play, whether it's, you know, relationships or dealing with new interviews like this, or bills or financial concerns or anything like that. Like, those fears are always there. This is something that we have a conversation about quite frequently with people in our audience, is that they think there's a place where the fear just stops popping up. It's like, no, but there is a place where you can stop responding to it in the same way that you have been, where you can stop thinking that it means there's something wrong.
Yes. You know, you said that you can, I can't remember exactly the way you put it, but you can, you can talk yourself into being afraid. You can talk yourself into being stressed. And in fact, it's exactly what we're doing, and you can, oh, I know what you said. The point I was making is you can really talk yourself out of being in your nature because you've been trained to be that way. It's really hard to find a completely happy person, as I was saying. And the irony is we were born happy. We were born free, but we become trapped in our own limited thinking. And we've been trained to think in limited terms. We were born with this wonderful open heart that stress and fear so easily closes for so many people. We were born extremely gifted, creative people of immeasurable worth, intrinsic worth, but often people don't feel good enough. And there's this divinity of joy within us and surrounding us that's there to make our life rich and meaningful and beautiful, but we're blocked from seeing it. And it's because of the way we are programmed. It's the way we are conditioned by our culture. Our culture, we live in a culture that's fear-based and shame-based. It's all around us. The way the shame-based happens is, we're told through our religions that, we're flawed human beings, that are sinners and that kind of thing. And, that ingrains into the brain. That ingrains into the way in which the brain sees you, and the way in which the brain, if you're a flawed, compromised human being, and your brain has been programmed to see yourself that way, then your brain sees you as at risk. And if your brain sees you at risk, it's going to excite fight, flight, or freeze reactions. And those fight, flight, or freeze reactions are going to dump toxic stress hormones into your system. And those toxic stress hormones, what the research has shown is that they shrink the higher order brain function, where your intelligence, where your creativity, where your positive emotions, where your intuition, where all of that connects up. It shrinks those networks, and it actually expands the networks in the limbic system, where the amygdala, the fear center, is, and expands those to make you far more reactive to situations and to perceive threats where often no threat exists at all. It's sort of like what that 15th century philosopher Montaigne said, is my life has been a series of terrible calamities, some of which actually happened. Well, that's the stress reactions that most people are having. And so how did that happen to us? That's a very important question to ask ourselves. And it was programmed into us. We're programmed with ideas about who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to want, how the world is supposed to be, how people are supposed to be with us, what they're supposed to do for us. And so when life doesn't go the way our social programming says it should go, the way the demands that it's put in us make us react to the world, we get upset. And all of that upset basically boils down into this striving personality. You got to strive to succeed. You strive for everything you've got. And if you get it, you got to hold on to it. And that turns into this very oppressive thing that's terribly stressful for people, which is the fear of failing. So all you really have to do is step back from that distress, and at the same time to let yourself feel the upset as I was describing without fixing anything. Understand that that stress is happening in you. It's not your fault. You were programmed to upset yourself. And just understand that. And as you do that, as you observe the distress, it will pass. Everything passes. And as it passes, what naturally arises in that moment is this natural sense of wonder, this natural sense of peace, this natural sense of connection and love that is the essence of your being, the very essence of your being, that's been blocked by the way in which you've been programmed to run out there in the world and kick ass, and and achieve this great success that, for 80 some percent of the people are going to end up in a state of emptiness and unfulfillment eventually.
Well, and what's interesting there, and this is something I always find kind of easy to misinterpret when we say programming, is that we are not separate from that programming. As long as we're participating in that mentality, we're actually also helping to perpetuate that programming in other people through our own expectations of them, through our own thoughts that they should be something else, and then acting that out. And it just reinforces the narrative they're telling for themselves. And so it's so interesting because it's not so much that we're just being programmed, we're also helping the programming, which is why it's so important to set yourself free. Because in doing so, now you're not perpetuating that mentality anymore. Now you're not out there competing and comparing and reminding everybody that they should be competing and comparing too. And it changes everything. So it's so interesting how you deprogramming yourself is in itself helping the collective deprogram itself.
That's right. And there's no getting around the fact that you can't go around it. You can't go around the program. You got to go through it. So it's very important to take a look at the way that you've been put together and the way you're functioning. And what you will find when you take a look at it is that inside your brain, there's this whole program that society stamped in there that wired right into your brain. These set of demands that I've been talking about, how the world should be, you should be, how everybody should be with you, which, as you were just saying, turns into either the attempt to change other people, to make you feel comfortable, or you end up blaming them, because most people don't, they don't turn themselves over to making the change you want them to make. And this whole programming, it's imperiously insisting that its demands be met by life, by other people, by you. And if those demands are met, your brain quiets down a little bit. It allows you to feel some elation, some self-satisfaction, but it's very short-lived, And if they're not met, which is at least half the time, even when it's not your fault, and most of the time it's not your fault, it's just the world. The world goes up and down. It's a mercurial world we lived in. But if it's not met, your brain generates these negative emotions that cause you to suffer. And so, we've really been trained to upset ourselves, to stress ourselves. So when other people don't live up to our expectation, it torments us with the frustration, anger, we start blaming, we start becoming bitter. And when things are not under our control, the future is looking uncertain, our brain and that fear center, the amygdala of our brain, it begins insisting that you experience anxiety, that you become tense, stressed, that you pace the floor in worry. And then you're going to go about expending a ton of energy coping with these negative emotions by expending even more energy trying to rearrange the world around you, change people around you so that these demands are met. And you don't even understand the demands really at the heart of it. And sometimes if that happens, you get this precarious piece, but it's precarious because at any moment, something's going to go wrong. Everything from from a plane delay to spilling a catsup on your tie. If we weren't making ourselves miserable, we'd be happy. If we weren't constantly making ourselves miserable with our upsetting ideas, we'd be happy right here. We were born happy. The world is shot through with happiness. We can't see it because our programming obstructs it. So it becomes a way of life. It becomes a pathetic existence that's constantly at the mercy of of things and people and outcomes, as we're trying desperately to make life conform to those demands. But the only peace we really ever know for most people is this temporary respite from the negative emotions it's causing. And so the question then becomes, well, how do you get past that? And the answer is, you bring it into awareness, as I was discussing. And the awareness process, it's simple 4-step process. It's not very hard to do. The first thing you need to do is just get in touch with those negative feelings, whatever they might be. Most people are pushing them away or repressing them, or suppressing them, like I was. And most people are trying, or if they're not doing that, they're trying to turn them into some sort of positive affirmation. And, good luck with that. That doesn't go very far. So whatever you're feeling, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling shame, you're feeling self-hatred, you're feeling life is pointless, you're feeling afraid, worried, just get in touch with those feelings first. Observe the thoughts you're thinking that are producing it, producing the feelings, leading to that narrow perspectives. It turns into that attitude that really disempowers your life. And you step back from it. In Zen Buddhism, they have this thing, they call it stepping back. Just step back from it. Just allow it to be there. They talk about observing it as if you're watching another person. Because as you do that, what you begin to understand is, this isn't me at all. This is just a bunch of programming that's running me. But when I'm looking down on it, almost as if you're looking down at your friend going through this, you begin to feel compassion for this horrible game that you've been taught to play on yourself. And you just watch it from a distance. And it's a tricky kind of experience, because at the same time, you're allowing this turmoil to arise, but you're watching it also in a kind of detached way. You're in it, but not of it, kind of thing. And then the second step is to acknowledge that the negative feeling is in you. It's not in reality. This is a reaction you've been trained to have. It's not in reality. Reality's fine. Reality's always fine. It's neutral. We're the one who puts the labels on it. This is bad. This is good. This is great. This sucks. This person's wonderful. This person's no good. We're putting these labels all over everything, thinking what we're naming is real, and it's not real at all. We see the world as we are. We don't see the world as it is. And so acknowledge that this is happening in me, stirred up in me. I'm not to blame for it. I've been programmed to be this way, but it's going on in me. It's having me see what it is that I'm seeing in this distorted way. So it's in me, and it's not in reality. And it's you'll eventually come to a point of understanding it's not only in you, but it's happening for you. It's happening to wake you up. And then the next step is, again, just keep remembering not to identify with that negative feeling. Don't define yourself in terms of those negative feelings. Anthony de Mello, the great mystic, he talks about actually going as far as to stop saying, I am afraid, I am depressed. Instead say, my experience right now is depression. My experience right now is worry, is fear. My experience right now is that shame that says I'm not good enough. Don't identify it with it. That's our mistake. That's our illusion. We're not our emotions. We're much grander than any fleeting emotional experience we're having. So, de Mello talks about it as it's like throwing black paint into the air, right? And does the air become contaminated with the black paint? No, it comes to the ground. The same thing, you indulge your negative feelings and it creates this flurry that goes up into the air. But through awareness, it collapses. And that's the next step in the process, is to understand that everything passes, especially emotions. They come and go by the carload. So there you are in the middle of your torment. And at the same time, you're looking at it as if it were someone else's upset, acknowledging it's in me, not in reality, and understanding that it will pass because everything passes. And when it does pass, you'll have this moment where you're free. There's nothing more incarcerating than a crowded mind. It forces you into a very tiny space. Well, through this process, that reverses, and now you're in this open space. And so relax into the feeling of being free. Relax into that open space, and you. Oftentimes, what will happen for you is that kind of from a sideways sort of effect, your intuition will help you understand where this reaction was coming from. One day, years ago, everything was going just terrific. My books were selling, business was good. My wife and I were doing wonderfully. None of my kids were in trouble. Everything was wonderful. It was a good day, a lot to be grateful for. And I'm walking down the hallway to my office, and suddenly I'm consumed by this dread. It's like somebody just dropped this cloud over me, and I'm in this dread. And it's really, I felt it in my heart. It seized hold of my heart. And because I'd been doing this awareness process for so long, I just didn't try to skate on by. I went over and sat down, and I went, what is this? And I walked myself through this process that I just discussed with you. And I got past it. And then I remembered something that should have been absolutely obvious to me. But, sometimes there's nothing as invisible as the obvious. But I remembered something I had a pretty brutal stepfather. And one of the things that he used to hammer into me was that if anything good ever came my way, I would turn it to shit. He said, even if it was gold, you'd turn gold to shit. You'd find a way to turn gold to shit. And he hammered that into me and told me that so many times, oftentimes followed by some violence, some abuse, that it wired into my brain. And I hadn't realized, as I sat there in that chair, I realized I had been living under that cloud for all of my adult life. When anything good ever happened, that cloud was always there. I just was unconscious to it. I was unconscious to the way I was programmed. And now, through this awareness process, through my willingness to face it, to feel it, to go through it, instead of suppressing it and pushing it away or trying to change it into something else, but having the courage to be there with it, it freed me. And so it still comes up. It's kind of hard, like you were saying. Once your brain gets wired in a certain kind of way, it's still going to play its algorithm. It's going to run its algorithm. But when it does, I just smile now, and I shift out of it quickly. In fact, that's my definition of enlightenment. Enlightenment is what used to get you and imprison you in a prison that would last for hours or days or weeks. You now shift within 10, 15 seconds. That's enlightenment. You shift out of that programmed negativity into that empty, wonderful space of freedom in which you experience your nature. And in that freedom is where you experience that love, that peace, that creativity, that sense of connection to all that is, that sense of wonder that we lose growing up, that children, it's so natural to children. So that's how it works. It's just really that simple. And but the fact that it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. it takes a certain amount of courage to do it. But if you remember to do this little process throughout your day, you'll get it. And what you will get is that homecoming to the experience you were born to have.
Oh man, well said, and well said. I really enjoyed you laying all of that out for us, and how much it just comes down to the willingness to look, right? The willingness to take that responsibility. And I wondered for years, like, had certain things, certain tendencies, certain triggers, and I wondered where they came from. And rather than looking at it, really looking at it, I tried to figure out ways to control my way out of it, avoid them. You're not feeling great, just do this thing that's going to make you feel better. Just get a good grade on your test. Just graduate from school. Just go work out, something to basically not look at those feelings. And so there's almost like a building up. But to your point, it really comes down to being willing to look at them, take responsibility, right? Realize, oh, this is just coming from me. It's not on anyone else. Like, my experience is my responsibility. So in that, I start to look at it instead of avoid it, realizing that's all that I can ever do. And then when I look at it, it's like, oh shit, there's something there. That's a really intense thing that I'm feeling. And then as you relax, it's almost like, at least as I've gone through things, those things come up, like your realization of your dad and some of those perspectives. Like, when there's always something behind certain feelings, but rather than, because we're so afraid of feeling the feelings, or think that there's something wrong with the feelings, even just the overlying statement, like, there's certain feelings that are good to feel and certain feelings that are bad to feel. I think that reinforces a lot of our resistance to certain feelings, as opposed to maybe letting go of that and just thinking, like, I don't actually really necessarily know what this feeling is. And if I don't really know what it is, then it's hard for me to really fight it, right? It's hard for me to think that it shouldn't be happening. It's like, I don't know if it should or shouldn't or whatever, but it's happening, and that's the reality. And I think that's, to your point, a lot of what you played out there. And so I'm curious, with when it comes to the relaxation and the realization of just being willing to face things and look at things, and that everything is sort of just within you, how that's shifted your perspective of yourself, and how that's evolved, and if it's, created a different perception of yourself that's shifted a lot, or if it's just something without so many thoughts and perspectives that you don't think about in the same way as often. It's more about the application, more about the relaxation, more about the just doing things and being enthusiastic about what you're doing and what's happening right now.
I think the one thing that I would say above all is, I don't take my negative emotions seriously when they get a hold of me. I just process them, and I also understand that these negative emotions, they're not my, kind of like, I would say what you said, I understand what you're saying, but I would say a little differently, is that I'm not responsible for having them. I've been programmed by my society to have them. They did a study, for example, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, how we're programmed. They did a study in Europe of 900,000 people. That's an enormous study they surveyed. And it's a bona fide study. And what they studied is, what is the impact of advertising on people? And after sorting through all the data, it boiled down to one thing, is that advertising made people unhappy. And when they looked into it, did it make them feel unhappy? Because it makes them feel worthless. It makes them feel there's something wrong with who they are, and they need to improve themselves in this way, which they can cure their baldness and be better looking. They can go on a cruise and have it just goes on and on and on. You use this detergent, your clothes will be better. And it's this constant bombardment of you need a new improved you. It leads people into this shame state. And so our culture is shame-based. It uses shame to manipulate us. It's also fear-based. You don't have to look any further right now in America than to our politics. It's completely fear-based. But again, it's not that we're a fearful people, but we use fear. We use fear in work to intimidate people, to manipulate people, to get what we want out of people. And so I understand that, you know, those tendencies in me, which I still have, got wired into me. And although it's not my fault, and it doesn't do any good actually to blame society, doesn't help me liberate myself from them by blaming anybody for them, I'm still responsible for cleaning up the programming. I got to go in and clean up the programming that was done to me. And one of the other things that I've learned is that what the Buddha said is that the source of our suffering, all suffering, is attachments. And I've really come to understand what he's meant by that, which is what we're programmed to have. We're programmed to have these attachments. And what an attachment is, it's this emotional state of clinging caused by the belief that's been programmed into us that without this thing or that person or achieving this outcome, we can't be happy. And, you know, at some point today, I invite all your listeners to write down on the top of a piece of paper, just this simple statement: I cannot be happy unless or until, and then fill in the blanks. For example, I can't be happy unless my boss appreciates me. I hear that a lot. Or I can't be happy until I'm out of debt. Or I can't be happy until I don't have this brain tumor. Or, you know, a couple of years ago, it was, I can't be happy until the pandemic is over. You know, anything that's true for a person. I cannot be happy unless or until, and then write down your list. And then look at the list over and consider that these thoughts, these beliefs are blocking your natural state of happiness. You spend some time seeing each of these things that you cling to for what they really are. They're a nightmare. They get you all excited and filled with pleasure on the one hand, if you get them, and with worry, insecurity, tension, anxiety, fear, unhappiness on the other. I remember first time I bought a new car, I was a kind of slave to making sure it was parked where no other car could get near it, so somebody wouldn't open their car door and ding it. And you know what invariably happened? I would put it like at the far end of the parking lot, and somebody would park next to me. I think the universe was chasing me down, trying to get me to realize that, you know, don't be attached. And you know, we get attached. If I get that job, everything will be wonderful, and we end up hating the job. You know, it's so an attachment. To understand an attachment, you have to understand it as this belief that without these things, without this person, without this outcome, you can't be happy. It's a false belief. The truth is, we have everything we need every moment to be happy. It's our nature. And the only reason we're ever unhappy is because we're focusing on what we don't have. And the moment you make that shift into focusing again on what you do have, which, you know, it's a simple matter of counting your blessings, it's as simple as that, you begin to shift. Your whole attitude towards life begins to shift. You're in a whole new world from one moment to the next. And what you've been restored to, the world you're in, is the world you were born to be in, the world in which you're that true nature, that first nature that you came into this world with, and that is there to generate the experience of a fulfilling life every moment, with life just the way it is. And that's what you begin to discover. So that's the second thing that I've learned through all of this, is I had to, you know, to get through that surgery, I had to let go of being attached to the outcome. Because every time I got attached to the outcome of what I wanted, or I would begin to think of, it would flip over to, well, what if it doesn't happen? Then what? And what if it's like this? So I just started letting that go, letting go, letting God, letting go, letting God. Same thing with my job. You know, will I ever work again? Can't be worried about that right now. We'll take care of that, cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, all is well. And that's one of the things that this process opens us up to, is what the mystics have all been telling us, is that all is well. Even when everything's a mess, or it seems to be a mess, all is well. It's all is well because we are. People say, it's sort of like people will say, the world is right and I'm happy. No, I'm happy, therefore the world is right. This is the way it works. Everything is this 180-degree shift in perspective. That's enlightenment.
And as Krishnamurti used to say, we are the world. And I think that is the one thing that, I always try and keep in mind, because it is very easy to look at, say, how advertising has an impact on us and forget that it's people doing the advertising based on the same mentality of competition and comparison, trying to survive, trying to make it in their company, trying to sell their product, trying to pay their bills, trying to get ahead. It's not always some dark, shadowy corporation. It's often a corporation run by people just like you and I, who maybe don't have that clarity or haven't realized that they are lost in that mentality. Same with attachment. Like, it's true, attachment as an adult is a big thing that we have to get over in terms of ego development, but attachment as a child is the most natural thing, to attach to our parents, to attach to their safety, to attach to the security that they offer us. And so even that becomes a developmental thing if we choose to let go of attachment. But I think that this is the process, is that we just didn't. It's kind of like, as a society, we stagnated around teenage years and we haven't moved on into being an adult. And this conversation is a big part of that shift, recognizing that, again, as you said, we are the world, we're the change, and as we change, everything changes with us. But it can become very easy to be impatient. It can become very easy to oversimplify and say, this is just the lot we're stuck with, and rather than this is the lot we're changing all the time.
And just to bring that into awareness, then notice that thought, this is the lot. It's not, this is as good as it's going to get. Begin to catch your thinking. It's very important to do that. And then notice what that thinking turns into in the way of the negative emotion that you experience next. And just with every thought you have, that particularly when it's got some valence of negativity to it, catch it. We're not catching it, where it's pulling us into this, it's building into this story that we're believing, and that's turning into what we're living out of. And so you catch it at its, its first little fragment that comes up, that's trying to build its way back up into this story that's going to enslave you, that's going to imprison you. Catch it. And then look at this thought. Look at how I value this thought. Look at how I deem it to be reality. And it's not reality. It's mind-made. It's been mind-made out of a thought system that doesn't even work. Because if you were in a thought system that worked, you'd be happy. That's by definition a thought system that's working. A thought system that produces the experience of happiness, of peace, of connection. And if that's of an open heart. But if what you find yourself in a thought system that's shutting you down, that's closing your heart, that's making you tense, that's stressing you, you need to do something about it. And the first thing you do is catch it when it raises its ugly head, when it first pops up in that thought, whatever the thought may be, and question it. This is as good as it gets. Why do I believe that? And how do I feel? And then when I say, why do I believe that? Don't try to answer it, because you never will. Just notice it. Like, look at that. I'm thinking that. How long have I been thinking that? Forever. And what's it gotten me? Unhappiness. And what do I need to do to shift it? You need to bring it into awareness and let awareness shift it for you. Awareness will wake you up. And this is not this, and every time you find yourself, look when you're feeling anxious or afraid or depressed, look to what are you attached to? Ask yourself, what am I attached to? I'm attached to this person changing in this way and being this way for me. What if I drop that attachment? I'm attached to this outcome. I'm trying to pursue success, and success right now in my mind is framed like this. The guy who built IBM into the great corporation it is, he says, at least be sure that you make enough mistakes, enough errors, because that's how we learn, you know? And so you got this outcome you're reaching for, this person you want to be with you in a certain kind of way, these things you want to possess because your neighbors possess them, you know, keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. Those are attachments. So look at it. What attachment is there that's causing me to suffer? And what if I let go of that? What if I let go? And letting go of an attachment. Most people think, well, you know, then if I do that, then I won't move forward. You know, I won't have dreams. You know, I won't be motivated. And that's not what dropping an attachment means. It doesn't mean to renounce the material world, not at all. You know, you use the material world, you enjoy the material world, but you do not make your happiness depend on the material world, because if you do, you're going to end up unfulfilled. You're going to end up unhappy, because this world that is not operating in a way in which it's interested in fulfilling your dreams. In fact, most of the time it feels like it's working against it. But the truth of the matter is it's really neutral. But you know, this world is hard. The ground's hard. So, but you don't renounce the world. You know, you don't renounce your dreams, your enterprises. And the interesting thing about it, the irony is that when you're detached from the material world, as you pursue your success, your dreams, your enterprises, you actually enjoy the process more than when you believe your self-worth and your peace and your happiness depend on the outcome. And, you know, you're in that mindset. If you succeed, great, wonderful. If you fail, well, you know, my happiness and self-worth are not at stake, and there's something to learn from that failure, you know, because you know, since my heart hasn't closed, I'm open. Since my mind hasn't closed in fear, I'm open. I can learn from this thing. It's that simple.
Well said, man. And that certainty that there's some other experience in the future that I somehow know is definitely going to be better or worse than the experience I'm having right now. And it's not that at all. It's relaxing into realizing, you know, maybe I don't know. But Don, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, man. I've really, really enjoyed you sharing some of the things, probably some little snippets that may or may not be in your book, The End of Stress, 4 Steps to Rewire Your Brain. Really, really appreciate you coming on to chat with us. And I look forward to hopefully chatting again soon.
All right. Well, thank you both for the work you do out here in the world.
Likewise, Don, as somebody who's been practicing very much this for about half my life, because for me, it wasn't physical health, it was mental health. It was either I was going to get this or it was going to break me. And so from my end, thank you so much for being out there, being a voice for this change and for embodying it yourself. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too. And right back at you. Thank you for being out there mirroring this stuff to the rest of the world.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We really appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.